Tākiri ko te ata, kōrihi ko te manu, ka ao, ka awatea, tihei Māori. Ko Tom Alesana ahau, te kai hautu o te ahu o te reo ki te tauhi. Ahu tia te whakaaro, ahu tia te kōrero, mai te kore, ki te pō, ki te ao mārama. So an adult learner of Te Reo Māori through Tuiana Davidson. What was that like?
It was ruthless. It was great, but it was terrifying. Because of my connections here with the tākau whānau and their connections with Tuiana Davidson, I got there and they decided, oh cool, level 2, year 2, and I was like, I can't string a sentence together. So they just threw me in the deep end, whereas normally when you enrol for Heke Reo you have 2 weeks bilingual to kind of ask the questions that you need to ask, kind of get used to the environment and stuff, and then ka whakatakoto te Māori and ka rāhui Te Reo Māori, but I didn't get that because of that hononga, so that was nice, which resulted in me crying in the toilets. And then Atua kind of coming to find me and being like, I think we need to take you back to level 1, which I was happy about, and I was happy to start at level 1 and go through the levels, but yeah, and Pakeke learning Te Reo Māori is super humbling. It gave me a real insight to our children who are non-verbal, because if once I got some reo, I knew what people were saying, but then I couldn't reply, and I was like, this must be what it's like for some of our tamariki that understand what's happening but they can't whakaputa te reo. And so because my background was in early childhood, that gave me a real good humbling experience. But yeah.
How many years did you study at Te Davidson?
So initially I was meant to go for 1. I went to go for Heke Reo, and then I fell in love with Te Reo Māori and didn't want to leave, but 2, Papa Sean Bennett Ogden had other ideas for me, and every lunchtime he would say, ka hoki mai koe Tuiana, and I'd say, ka hoki au ki te ao mahi paps, and every day he would say that to me, and then he ended up unfortunately passing away, and so I was like, now I have to go back. And so I stayed for 3 years into my pautuara mōreo.
Awesome. And what did that mean to you, to your whānau, you know, to bring Te Reo Māori back into your whānau, to centralise it in your world, essentially?
It was huge, I think. It was really interesting because my mum is, you know, my lineage to my whakapapa Māori, and my dad is Scottish. But he was really supportive of my reo journey because he was a linguist and did translation work, and he really understood the importance of language for culture, so he was really supportive and encouraged me, whereas Mum was a bit more hesitant, I think. And I think that was around her experience of other reo speakers towards her who didn't have the reo. So yeah, it kind of, by me going on my journey, has sparked her to go on her journey a bit, and to see that if someone has the reo, it doesn't mean that you look down on other people that don't, and especially someone that's lived through not having the reo and now having the reo. I know what that's like, so I'll never judge someone else or like criticise them, because it can be super mamai. And so yeah, I don't know, it comes with lots of complexities, because it's awesome to have te reo and to bring it back, because my great grandmother, she was our last fluent te reo Māori speaker, and me and my cousin are the first ones of our generation to bring it back, and they say it takes 1 to lose it and 5 to bring it back, and so we're the first. So while that's exciting, it also means there's a lot of mahi cut out for us. Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest part of that mahi for you and your cousin, particularly as the two that have, brought Te Reo Māori back to your whānau?
It's a tricky one, eh? It's one being a tauira, to say that Te Ao Māori has so much to offer, and to show my other cousins or my aunties and uncles, but it's also doing the mahi. You're also the teacher. You're oh, we need a waiata, we need a this, we need a that. Okay, yep, that falls on us.
Hautapa nui tērā.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm delayed in responding, because it's like I feel the taumaha. Yeah. But it's also cool. It's cool to be that person and to be, I have my cousins that are studying at university now, and because there's an expectation to do a tiriti or waitangi paper or whatever, they'll message me, hey, what's our pepeha, or what's this, or what does this mean? And then that's cool, because I get to invite them to things, or be that doorway, I guess, back into Te Ao Māori. But yeah, it can be heavy sometimes, because sometimes I don't want to. I just want to chill.
That heaviness you talk about, I want to sort of move it into your mahi that you do, so your kaiako mahi, because there's a lot of pressures on kaiako reo Māori. I was speaking to the converted here, but those pressures, are they similar to the pressures you feel in terms of that responsibility you have with your whānau, or is it totally different?
It's different, but I don't know, but the same. And for me, I talk about when I'm teaching, because predominantly I teach Pākehā or Tauiwi Te Reo Māori, and I talk about the two worlds that we live in Aotearoa that exist, of Te Ao Pākehā, Western world, and Te Ao Māori, our Indigenous world. And our value system around knowledge and responsibility, and how they're different. And in Te Ao Pākehā, there's kind of this understanding that if you want to know something or you want to learn something, you go and do it. Right. You enroll in a program, you go to university, you go on Google, whatever, and you acquire that information, and generally speaking, that benefits the individual, and there's kind of not much responsibility attached to that. Te Ao Māori, it's very different in the way that you won't learn something until you're ready to know that, or the collective kind of decides that that knowledge is going to be passed on. Or if you're to know something, then what is your responsibility to your collective? And so for me, in that way, that's my responsibility to my whānau, is that by teaching Pākehā and Tauiwi, that I have these open and sometimes hard conversations around allyship and colonisation, and how moving forward as one in Aotearoa, we can do that respectfully, but that's it's not, I don't have those conversations because I want to or sometimes enjoy them. That's my responsibility to my whānau, because they find it really hard to engage with their reo or their culture because of colonisation, and they feel that mamai. And so I believe it's my responsibility to be in that teaching space, to have those conversations, so that isn't happening again.
And I guess you've touched on one point that I really wanted to get to. One was around the big C word, because no one likes to say it, but the impact of colonisation on particularly our Māori learners that are coming into this space, and they're in a space of reclamation, and how, as a kaiako, do you support your learners through reclamation of not only their reo, but for some of them it's their identity, it's it's their tuakiri, and it's their first engagement in their Te Reo Māori.
Yeah, I say the C word a lot, and my students freak out when I say, in this class we're going to talk about the C word, and they're like, and then I'm like, it's colonisation, they're like, and it's like almost a little bit, they can breathe a little bit because it's not as bad as what they thought it was going to be, but it's also, there's a lot of contention around that. But yeah, I always say to my ākonga, if you have whakapapa Māori learning Te Reo Māori, it's healing. If you're Pākehā Tauiwi learning Te Reo Māori, it's learning, and both journeys are valid and valued, but they look very different. And because that was me on my journey learning my reo, I didn't go and study at Tuananga Raukawa to, it wasn't for my career, it wasn't for anything other than I wanted to know who I was and where I came from. And for a lot of our Māori students, that's the place that they come from too. And it can be quite scary. It can be, they've lived in a colonial world their whole life. They've assimilated. They haven't had any introduction to Te Ao Māori, and so they've plucked up the courage and walked into a classroom. And then they're alongside Pākehā or Tauiwi who, it's definitely changed in 3 years that I've been teaching. 3 years ago it was, I had some free time, I'm going to pick up a night class and learn Te Reo Māori, whereas now there's definitely more a conversation around, I think there's some responsibility to be a citizen of Aotearoa to learn Te Reo Māori and to acknowledge the Indigenous people. And so there's been a shift, which is great. However, you can imagine, being in a space of students with two very different reasons for being there, that can be quite tricky sometimes to hold that space. And so I don't know, I definitely don't have all the answers and I'm still navigating that, but I find the best way is to acknowledge that, is to acknowledge this is what the landscape that we're navigating, and the reasons that this is going to hit differently for different students is because of this. And sometimes that means for my Māori ākonga having conversations with them prior to a class and saying, hey, we're going to talk about some of this stuff. This might bring some stuff up for you, and that's valid because of this, and this, and so you need to do what's best for you in that space, because I also need to be able to hold the space for these other ākonga so that they learn how to be a good ally in the long run. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but yeah, I don't even know if that answers the question.
You talked about allies and being good allies. To you, what does a good ally look like?
Yeah, it's a real tricky one, because I have, my students ask that, because we kind of go through this journey.
They want a tick box, like, I follow this process.
Yeah, because they want to know, okay, well, we've delved into the history about what's happened, and sometimes there's a bit of guilt there, or there's not, there's just a compassion, and there's like, okay, well, they understand the importance and the responsibility that goes with that. So they're like, okay, well, what do I do? And so that's hard, because they have to then say to them, well, there's no blueprint and there is no tick box. And I don't envy the role of a homie, of an ally, because it is hard. I think what I say to my students is to be engaged in the conversation. And I do have ākonga that say to me sometimes, Tuiana, do you think it's appropriate for Pākehā or Tauiwi to be learning Te Reo Māori after you've, taken us on this journey and taught us about the history? And my response to that is, I wouldn't be doing this job if I didn't believe Pākehā or Tauiwi, shouldn't be learning, because again, for me, that comes back to my responsibility to my whānau, my collective, of why I'm there in the first place. So yes, I think we need to be, holding that space for everyone to be on the waka of te reo. But because those journeys are different, that responsibility looks different, And so sometimes it means knowing something and not saying anything. And I say it's a hard role to take is because you're going to make mistakes, and no one really likes doing that. You know, it's hard for anyone. We don't want to offend people, or the thing is, we're going to make mistakes. You know, one of my tikanga that I have in the classroom is mā te hapaka ako, by making mistakes we learn, right? And as a homie, that can be daunting. And so the three things that I kind of equip my akonga with is like this bit of armor that they can wear, because knowing that they're gonna make mistake, what you can do to prep yourself, I guess, is to build a bit of a tuapapa, to know, okay, well, I might not get it right, but at least I can fall back on, I've done this work, and then I can reassess from there. And so my three kind of things I ask them is, why am I doing this? Well, why am I doing this? Who is benefiting? And am I taking a role from someone? And you know, they can be kind of like fleshed out into different areas or different things. But quite often what happens is there's the knowledge, I've got to remember. There we go. It's back. So the thought... No, other way around. Knowledge, thought, action. So we learn something, and so that might be around colonisation, and we're like, okay, we've learned that this stuff happened and it wasn't great. I now have a thought that I want to do something about it because it's informed by my knowledge, and then we act on it. That's kind of the process that happens. But what sometimes happens is, in that process of the thought, before it gets to the action, we don't spend enough time sitting in there and actually diving deeper, because sometimes, you know, we go back to the why am I doing this, and they're like, well, because I want to be an ally, or I want to help. And so then that's actioned. Whereas actually, if we rewind a little bit and then go, well, hold on, who is this benefiting? Is it benefiting Māori by me engaging in this way, or is it benefiting me because I feel a bit guilty about what happened? And if we can be really honest around those intentions, then you're more likely to do things that are more effective and that are going to be helpful. Again, you're not always going to get it right, because the landscape that we're dealing with is complex, and our history is complex, and like us as Māori have different experiences of what it means to be Māori, because we were also colonised. So there's all those intricacies that makes it really tricky. But my thing is, for a homie, is like, one, be engaged in the conversation, be critically aware, and ask yourself some reflective questions before you act. Yeah, and there's probably a lot more, you know, to do in that space. But yeah, and sometimes you do got to make a mistake to learn from it, you know.
As a kaiako, what is your favourite part of the role, like of the job, being a kaiako?
I love being a kaiako. I think it's watching people go on that journey. Like, I'm not a good reo kaiako.
That's what you say.
I'm not. I'm really not. Like if I thought I was going to be teaching Te Reo Māori, I probably would have gone to more of my grammar classes. And I remember saying to someone when I was studying, I was like, I'm not going to teach Te Reo Māori. I just want to know Te Reo Māori, and then like that's come to bite me. Yes. And so and I say that to my students. I'm not a great reo teacher, but I think I am good at holding that space for those hard conversations, because some people don't want to, and I think that's fair. I think not everyone needs to either. It's not everyone's responsibility. I think that's what's really great about Te Ao Māori, is when we look at the collective, everyone can play a different role, and that's what I have to offer in those spaces. And so that's what I love. I love seeing akonga come in my class at the start of the year for whatever that reason is, whether they want to connect with their culture and who they are, whether it's they had some free time and they want to pick up a night class, or it's they think it's their responsibility to be a citizen of Aotearoa, to see that starting point and to where they end up, because the ripples that has, that's what's really exciting to me. And because of our concept in Te Reo Māori of ako, that reciprocal learning, like I'm constantly learning even though I'm at the front of the classroom. So yeah, that's what I love.
Going back to your teaching career in ECE, ECE do biculturalism really well.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily transfer into the other parts of the sector the same.
Yeah.
What do you think ECE does right? Like, what do they do right for biculturalism, but also Te Reo Māori? Because it's, we see it and hear it a lot.
It's interesting because I'm like, do we? Because I was in it. But then actually, when you step back and you look on the other sectors, well, actually there are some really great things. And I think that's the tuapapa, that's the marautanga, The curriculum is bicultural, it's bilingual, was written, by Māori, for Māori, and the values are great, and it's holistic, and that's how we are as Māori, so that's how it's easy to it's just got a good tuapapa, I think, good foundation to grow from. I have to be honest, I haven't been teaching in ECE for quite a while now, and there's been an update since I was teaching, so I think there have been some things that have been reviewed and changed. I think the challenge I had with it in the past was that it was almost too broad, so some people that were doing it could do it really well, but then it wasn't specific enough. So, and that's why I was kind of like, do we do it that way? Because there was room to kind of do the tick box thing of like, we're culturally competent because we do this, this, and this, but actually on a deeper level, are you? But I think that's been reviewed, and so maybe, I don't know if that answers your question.
And so, Te Ahu o Te Reo Māori, you've been a kaiako nā kaupapa, just like everyone else. It's not your full-time gig, it's just a bit of a side thing that you do, probably because of that responsibility you place upon yourself. What do you think has been the biggest shift within the sector through, Te Ahu o Te Reo Māori? Like, what are the things that you're seeing and hearing in the community?
Yeah, one, it's a great kaupapa. I find because I wear different hats as a kaiako and I work in other spaces, I felt sorry for teachers in some ways coming into my reo classes because they specifically wanted content for the classroom. And so I talked about reasons for learning te reo, that was kind of another one on there, whereas they were there for their kids or for their classroom, and so it was hard for them because I would have to kind of rein them in a bit, because I was like, no, because it was, again, all about the collective. It was hard to give them real practical, meaty stuff that they could just take away and implement in the classroom. So in that way, the kaupapa is great because it caters to that. It's like, okay, here's what you can do in that space. Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah, so I think that's what it is that you talked about how Te Ahu is specific to the sector, which is what it differs to sort of mātauranga Māori courses here, or night classes and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing, that teachers are wanting to, they're taking that initiative themselves. They've, and a lot of them have expressed that. They've said, we've been wanting to do something like this for ages and there hasn't been anything, so they've taken on night classes themselves or whatever, but because it wasn't catered, it was quite hard for them to then translate. So they've seen an opportunity and they've taken it up, which is awesome. And again, ripples in society from our reo classes, this has ripples in the education sector. They come along and then they tell other colleagues and they jump on the waka or the kaupapa. And the other thing I've seen, which is really inspiring and awesome, is seeing principals jump on, because when you have someone at the top and that kind of, again, talking about that foundation, they're able to implement and just everyone on the waka. So it's not just teachers, it's support staff, it's administration, it's parents that are involved in the kura. And so that, you know, it's reflective of Te Ao Māori when we talk about the collective. So that's really awesome in that way. That's what I love about it. Yeah, the
kaupapa has definitely taken off, particularly with those that are keen. But there are going to be those, you know, that's all the low-hanging fruit. Like, what are some strategies, do you think, to get to those people that are not resistant, but are maybe like, oh, I don't have the time, or, what do you think some strategies could be for encouraging others, especially for our whānau that have, they're trying to bring others with them?
It's a good part.
I don't
have the answers either, but I always remember, I can't remember if it was Papa Sean or Milton Rauhihi, who was my kaiako, because it was the same kind of thing in terms of whānau, that, you know, similar to my experience learning te reo. You have some people in the whānau that want to pick it up, and the other ones that are kind of on the other side of the fence, like, nope, I don't want to. And their kind of kōrero, or their approach is start with the ones that want to, because starting with them, that'll have the ripples, because then other people watch from the sideline, or they see people starting to shift, and you make it so exciting that they get FOMO. they have fear of missing out, that you know, we're doing cool fun stuff, and they're learning and they're growing, and I don't know, I guess the super biased, but like, what's good for Māori is good for everyone. And so when you've got people that are involved in that, it's not, you know, it's not just what's good for Māori, because it's what's good for the collective. It's, you know, manaakitanga, whanaungatanga, looking after each other, you know. So I don't know, that's invest in the ones that want to, and hope that it has the trickle on effect.
Education is going to play a real sort of important role in a societal shift towards seeing Te Reo Māori as an integral part of our identity as a country. What have been some of the shifts you've seen already just in the short time you've been a kaiako reo Māori?
Yeah, it's big. I think, yeah, because there's just more exposure now to Te Reo Māori, it's harder for people to be ignorant, because it's, you know, it's on the news, it's on the radio, it's in signage, it's and so that's, you know, part of some of the people enrolling in my courses, because they're like, oh, we want to know what they're saying in the weather, or so education has a huge part to play, I think, in that. Yeah, I just hope that people can engage in the conversations as well, that it's not just the reo. And so for me, that's part of the education, and that's what's important in terms of society, I think, because I have seen the flip side of where it's Te Reo Māori's become super popular and everyone's engaging, and, you know, I was talking about how that affects my whānau, because they've kind of been oppressed for so long and been told it's not good to be Māori and all those things, and now everyone's super excited to be Māori. And so just being mindful of what that looks like, so that we're actually moving together. It's not a recycle of oppression in a different way. And so I think, yeah, I don't know, I feel like I'm going on kōtiti Heidi, but hopefully that makes some kind of sense.
For some of our whānau stepping into the space, it's hard, you know, and then to see, you know, Pākehā or Tauiwi very easily step into that space, can make them feel like not resentful, but, you know, like it adds to that taumahatanga, and that unpacking of trauma can be confronting on its own. And so, yeah, it's a tough one. Okay, that's the meaty questions out of the way. I've got a couple of quick fire questions for you just to round things off. Come on. So don't think too long. Hangi or boil up?
Boil up.
Fried bread, rewana.
Fried bread.
You're the second person. No. I'm all about the rewana. Margarine, butter.
Butter.
Steam pudding, trifle.
Oh, steam pudding.
So on your fried bread, is it golden syrup or jam?
Golden syrup.
That's a tough one for me. Last one. Noho Marae Hotel.
Oh, Awatea.
Yeah, there's been the common answer. Well, e mihi ana ki a koe, mō enei kōrero I tēnei rā. Me te nui o ngā kaupapa, he pai te rongo I ngā kaupapa huhua. Engari ngā kaupapa hohonu anō hoki, it's been awesome to delve into some of these kaupapa like allyship, the place of tauiwi and Pākehā and the revitalisation of Te Reo Māori. Thank you for sharing your time. E mihi ana ki a koe o te rā ki te kaupapa o te ahu o Te Reo Māori, nāna tāua I whakakao I tēnei rā. Hoi anō, ka whakairihi a te tapu o te kōrero, ki te tahu o te whare kia puta ki te whaiao, ki te ao māroma, tihei, Māori.